February 2026. An undisclosed forward operating location somewhere in the Gulf region. A U-2S pilot. Call sign withheld, unit designated article in open USAF parlance. Seals his pressure suit helmet and begins breathing pure oxygen. He has been doing this for 2 hours. The pre-breathe protocol is not optional. At 70,000 feet, if that seal fails, nitrogen bubbles form in his bloodstream within seconds. The aircraft is ready. The tasking is confirmed. Iranian nuclear infrastructure. Multi-pass collection run. Nobody knows he's coming. 70,000 feet. At that altitude, cabin pressure is equivalent to 29,000 feet. Without the pressure suit, you lose consciousness in seconds. Death follows in minutes. The pilot carries no weapons. No countermeasures except altitude. 7 hours. Alone. At the edge of space. We'll come back to this pilot and what his sensors captured over Iran that morning. But to understand why a 1955 airframe is still flying combat missions in 2026, you need to know what happened in the decades between. The U-2 first flew in August 1955. Lockheed's Skunk Works, Kelly Johnson's team, a black program so compartmented that senior Air Force officers didn't know it existed. The requirement was straightforward. Fly over denied territory at altitudes no adversary could reach. Soviet MiGs topped out around 45,000 feet in 1955. The U-2 cruised at 70,000. That gap was the entire strategy. It held until May 1, 1960. Francis Gary Powers, CIA contract pilot, Article 360, shot down over Sverdlovsk by an SA-2 surface-to-air missile. The Soviets hadn't built a better fighter. They'd built a better missile. The political fallout destroyed the Eisenhower-Khrushchev summit and rewrote U.S. reconnaissance doctrine overnight. The lesson wasn't, stop flying U-2s. It was, altitude alone is never permanent. Adversaries adapt. The gap closes. Then you find a new one. The 9th Reconnaissance Wing at Beale Air Force Base, California, operates the U-2S. Re-engined with the General Electric F-118-101 turbofan, producing 19,000 pounds of thrust. Wingspan, 103 feet. Maximum altitude, officially above 70,000 feet. Cruise speed, roughly 410 knots, indicated at altitude. The aircraft takes off at 40,000 pounds and flies so close to its aerodynamic limits that the margin between maximum cruise speed and stall speed is about 10 knots. Pilots call it the coffin corner. Too fast and the airframe compresses. Too slow and it falls. 10 knots of margin, 7 hours. In practical terms, the U-2S pilot cannot maneuver aggressively, cannot accelerate meaningfully, cannot descend fast without risking structural damage. His only real defense is that Iran cannot reliably hit him. That last part deserves unpacking. Iran operates the S-300 U-2 favorite, their most capable long-range surface-to-air missile system, delivered in 2016 after Russia lifted the export embargo. The S-300 U-2 has a documented maximum engagement ceiling of roughly 90,000 feet. On paper, a U-2S at 70,000 feet is inside the envelope. Reality is more complicated. Engagement ceiling and reliable kill probability are not the same number. The fire control geometry at 70,000 feet creates a slant range problem. The radar must track a low observable target. The U-2S manages its radar cross-section through carefully controlled aspect angles. At extreme altitude, while the missile travels a ballistic arc through multiple atmospheric layers. Iranian S-300 U-2 operators, per public assessments from Jane's Defense Weekly and IISS reporting, have shown inconsistent proficiency on high-altitude engagements. The envelope exists. The reliable kill probability at 70,000 feet, without advanced look-down, shoot-down fire control, is considerably lower than the ceiling spec suggests. The entire U-2 operational concept in 2026 rests on that gap between theoretical capability and practical probability. The senior year electro-optical reconnaissance system, SIRES-2C, is the U-2S's primary imaging sensor. It works in visual and near-infrared bands, producing imagery ground analysts describe as comparable to low-orbit satellite imagery with one critical difference: persistence. A satellite passes over a target in minutes. The U-2S can loiter. Multipass collection over the same target set across a single mission produces change detection data no satellite constellation can match at the same revisit rate. The ASARS-2 Advanced Synthetic Aperture radar system adds a capability clouds, darkness, and camouflage cannot defeat. Synthetic aperture radar generates imagery from radar returns, not reflected light. Iranian facilities under overhead cover, running at night, or obscured by weather are still visible. Analysts at ground stations connected via data link receive imagery in near real time. The pilot is the sensor platform. The analysis happens elsewhere, simultaneously. One detail from the public record on U-2 operations that stuck with me. The pilot cannot see the imagery his sensors are collecting. He knows the collection is happening. He knows the sensors are running. He doesn't know what they're seeing. 7 hours at the edge of space, flying a 10-knot coffin corner, breathing bottled oxygen, collecting intelligence he will never personally look at. The problem that morning in February 2026 wasn't Iranian air defenses. According to Aviation Week in Space Technology, citing unnamed defense officials, a critical data link component degraded during the collection run's third pass. Ground analysts lost the near real-time feed for roughly 22 minutes. The pilot continued the planned flight profile. Aborting mid-collection would have compromised the mission's primary target set. When the link dropped, analysts went blind on a time-sensitive portion of the collection. The pilot finished the pass anyway. Full data came off onboard storage after landing. The 22-minute gap became an analytical problem, not an operational failure. What nobody expected was what ASARS-2 captured on Pass 4. Activity at a facility that had shown no change in over 6 months of prior satellite observation. We'll get to that. Here's an unpopular position, and we'll say it plainly. The argument that the U-2S should have been replaced by Global Hawk a decade ago was operationally wrong, and the Air Force's own flight hour data backs that up. The RQ-4 Global Hawk, for all its endurance advantages, cannot carry Sires 2C and ASARS-2 simultaneously at the power levels the U-2S supports. The U-2S sensor payload capacity, roughly 3,500 pounds of mission equipment, exceeds what Global Hawk can operate at equivalent collection fidelity. The retirement push was a budget argument dressed up as an operational one. Subscribe to Air Force. Next week, we're breaking down the classified sensor comparison that ended the Global Hawk expansion program in 2024. The numbers are not what the Air Force publicly stated. What does that mean for 2026? The 9th Reconnaissance Wing operates roughly 27 U-2S aircraft, supporting missions across every combatant command simultaneously. There is no replacement in production. The Air Force's ISR roadmap, per congressional testimony from early 2025, identifies a collection gap that will open in the 2030s if the U-2S is retired without a direct successor. That gap is not theoretical. It is a scheduled capability reduction. On the strategic stakes, which platform would you trust for time-sensitive collection over nuclear infrastructure? A satellite with a 90-minute revisit cycle, or an aircraft that can loiter over the target for 7 hours? Comment your answer. The ISR community is genuinely split on this. The physiological demands the U-2S places on its pilots have no real parallel in operational aviation. The 2-hour pre-breathe protocol, 100% oxygen before flight to purge nitrogen from the bloodstream, is mandatory because any decompression at 70,000 feet means evolved gas. Nitrogen bubbles in joints, lungs, the central nervous system. Every U-2S flight carries that risk. Every pilot accepts it as a condition of the assignment. The pressure suit limits dexterity. Pilots train specifically to work the aircraft's controls wearing gloves that cut tactile feedback. The cockpit is cramped. The Skunk Works prioritized structural efficiency over crew comfort in 1955, and the basic geometry hasn't changed much since. Pilots eat through a small port in the helmet visor. 7 hours. The 9th Reconnaissance Wing has a formal physiological training program that evolved after a series of decompression sickness incidents in the early 2010s. Protocol changes reduced the risk but didn't eliminate it. In practical terms, every U-2S pilot accepts a non-zero chance of a debilitating medical event on every flight. In exchange for operating an aircraft no adversary has reliably neutralized in 70 years. Here's what this tells us about the current ISR landscape. Satellites are predictable. Adversaries know their orbital tracks and can time sensitive activity around them. Drones are exposed below 60,000 feet. Signals intelligence platforms catch emissions, but miss physical activity at hardened sites. The U-2S fills a collection niche that remains genuinely hard to replace, not because the technology is optimal, but because nothing else combines the payload capacity, the altitude, and the operational flexibility in one airframe. The U-2 will eventually be retired. The Air Force has acknowledged that. The pilots who fly it understand what budget documents can't capture. The question is whether the NGAD-era ISR architecture being built now will actually fill the gap, or whether the 2030s will repeat the lesson of the 1960s. Collection capabilities, once gone, are extraordinarily hard to rebuild. February 2026. The article pilot lands at the forward operating location after 7 hours and 12 minutes of flight. The ground crew secures the aircraft. A physiological support technician helps with pressure suit removal. Post-flight evaluation. Normal. No decompression events. The onboard storage containing 4 passes of SIRS-2C and ASARS-2 data is transferred to analysts within minutes of engine shutdown. Pass 4's ASARS-2 imagery showed construction activity at a previously static hardened facility. Activity that, per DoD public statements in March 2026, represented the first observed changes at that site in over 8 months. The 22-minute data link gap hadn't covered Pass 4. The collection was complete. The U-2S flew again the following week. And the week after that. The Dragon Lady is 70 years old. It is still the only platform that can do what it does, at the altitude it does it, with the sensor payload it carries. That's not a tribute to past engineering. It's an indictment of how slowly the gap has been closed. The question isn't whether Iran's air defenses will eventually be capable of reliably engaging targets at 70,000 feet. They will. The question is what the United States will have ready to replace the Dragon Lady when that happens. That answer doesn't exist yet.